the rate at which it's going to evolve and improve is going to happen at a pace that I don't think we've ever seen before. And it will change the way we all operate and that the world works, right? It just will.
So like we're like the toys.com stage of AI. Is that what you're saying? Hello, and welcome to Morning Energy Live. I'm your host, Andrew Gillick, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm really excited about that new intro music. All right, I'm also pretty excited about today's guest, Manuj Nikhanj, newly minted CEO of Enverus. First met Manuj about 10 years ago when someone on his team found a fledgling note that was being written by a young, hungry analyst that had a little edge to it. You were gracious enough to meet me for a conversation at the bar, so I guess whatever I put in your drink worked. And here we are. Manuj has spent his entire career in the energy sector. He's grown and exited 3 businesses, advising investors and operators alike on making data-driven decisions on capital allocation. So he's now working on his 4th here at Enverus, which he better not screw up. But that said, from where he sits today, he's got a great view of the entire energy landscape, which is why we're here. So Manuj, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah. All right, now you're making me wonder, man. I'm questioning whether or not I should have put that offer in 10 years ago. No, I'm just totally kidding.
We'll see how this next half hour goes.
Take it easy on me. I'm just kidding.
Before we get started, I'm going to ask you 5 very important questions to help the listeners get to know you a little better. Okay. All right. Manuj, what's the first concert you ever went to?
Oh, these are easy questions.
Well, these are they're warm-ups.
Although I do need to think back. I may have gone to one before this, but when I was 12, this is pretty cool. I got to go see Michael Jackson live in Sheffield, England. And I still remember it. There was no assigned seating. And so I was right at the front, and remember when I was 12 was a very, very long time ago. He flew in on a jetpack. It was pretty sick.
That's pretty funny. I bet you wanted a jetpack for a little while. Maybe you have one now. Who knows? All right, next question. Beach or mountains? Now, remember, this is a year-round commitment. What do you prefer?
I'm a beach guy, for sure.
Yeah, I'm aligned there. All right. Have you been to more countries? Now, there's a little twist to this question from my other guests, but have you been to more countries or provinces?
Well, there's not that many provinces, so countries for sure.
All right, fair enough. Next question, a little new as well. What is the best energy source?
Best energy sources, I think it depends. Whichever one is going to be low cost, clean, reliable, given the situation, right? Depending on where you live and the needs of the specific region that you're in. Very
diplomatic. Thank you. All right. Final question. What is the best sandwich?
Definitely peanut butter jam. And you gotta toast the bread for like 30% of the way, so it's warm but not too hard, and then the peanut butter melts a little bit. It's actually quite good.
All right, you give that some thought, so I appreciate that. All right, good stuff. All right, so we now know how I got here, but how'd you get here? Why don't you give the fans a quick background on how you fell in love with data?
So how did I get here? Well, I guess my entire career has been with Enverus or some version of form of this business. Basically, when I graduated from university, I joined a small startup called Rossmith Energy Group. And that was the predecessor to RS Energy Group and ITG before that. And I think I was probably like the 5th or 6th employee, and was a partner in the firm, and so I started my career there. The idea was initially building an independent research business for institutional investors, and then we grew from there, from half a dozen people to 30 people, bootstrapped business. We sold the business. I joined in 2001. Sold the business in 2011 to a Wall Street brokerage firm called ITG. We were there for 4 or 5 years and then carved ourselves back out. Was it Andrew knows, he was a part of it. We carved ourselves back out in 2015 with the backing of Warburg Pincus, and then 4 or 5 years there, and then joined Enverus and been with Enverus ever since. So basically a boring career, being with basically a single company, but many different iterations.
Not that boring. I mean, 6 people to what are we? 1,600 people today, something like that. Kind of a big change. Good stuff. All right. Well, so a lot of people know Enverus for oil and gas data. Others know us for land data. Some for courthouse data. Some for power data. I guess we do a lot of stuff these days. So how would you describe Enverus today?
So Enverus today, we are the largest SaaS company serving the energy markets. And so, our mission is pretty clear. We help power the global quality of life by enabling our customer base. We work with about 6,000 customers, actually probably over 100,000 users, to make faster, smarter decisions and really run more effective businesses. And that's by leveraging all of our innovative technology, data analytics, the insights that you and the teams create. And that's probably a fair, simple way at the highest level to describe us.
Good stuff. All right, now we got that out of the way. Let's talk about the markets a little bit. And I'd love to just start with we'll call it the traditional energy sector. Is it doomed? Well, no, don't answer that. Of course it's not. But how do you think of the next decade or so in terms of growth and in the traditional energy sector? And where's that going to come from?
Yeah, this is actually an interesting topic. I think if you were to ask people 4 or 5 years ago, the expectations, especially for oil, was that there was a lot of people out there saying, peak oil demand and the demand for oil is going to decrease. And if you look at forecasts now, every forecast is pretty much up and to the right. The global population between now and 2030 is going to increase by 500 million people. Urbanization is happening. GDP growth between now and 2030 is going to be up by about 25%. So literally the growth in GDP between now and the end of the decade is going to be equivalent to what Canada, US, and Mexico's GDP is combined today. And so all that really means is, our expectations are that the demand for almost all energy sources are going to continue to go up and to the right.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a change. Yeah. We are not doomed. No, but just creates lots of opportunity to figure out ways to supply that energy. All right. Well, as we're in this topic, let's talk a little bit about North America upstream in particular, as it's going to be one of those sources of energy that we need. So what do you think are the most pressing issues that are facing North American operators today?
I think the dynamics are quite interesting. We know all of the things that have happened over the last several years, right? There's been a focus on paying down debt, driving higher returns, so higher return on capital. And then there's also been a lot of consolidation that's happened. And so if you look at the reinvestment rates of the sector, right, back a few years ago, industry was reinvesting every dollar back into the ground. Today, that reinvestment rate is only around 50 to 60%. And so the net result of that is, if you look at the industry today, the ability for us to grow supply is somewhat challenged, notwithstanding all of the other things that you're talking about, infrastructure and all of that, right? And so ultimately what that means is, like, I think the US produces about 12.9 million barrels a day today. I think our expectations is you're going to peak out about 14 million barrels a day. Now, that doesn't mean the industry is going anywhere, right? It's extremely capital intensive. The base decline rate is 25 to 30%. And so industry has to deploy a couple $100 billion a year just to stay in the same spot. But it creates a different dynamic in the market, right? And so it's kind of where we see it today. What was the second part of that question?
No, I mean, I think just as you think about these pressing issues, whether it's profitability or consolidation, and you talked about being able to maintain that production, obviously that takes inventory. And so, one of the challenges we've seen in the spaces is operators running out of inventory. And so is that real? Is inventory something that operators can solve? Is there more out there? Is consolidation the answer? Should we be buying some Gen 8 offshore deep water rigs and trying to find something that way? What do you think?
No, inventory has obviously been the theme for the last few years. If you think about, like, it's interesting, you think about 2006 to 2014, it was all about acreage and land and a land grab. If you think about the last few years, it's been all about an inventory grab. And so I think a lot of the consolidation that we've seen, right, the couple $100 billion we saw last year and the 80 or so billion that we've seen the first couple of quarters of this year, is really driven by operators looking at their portfolio of assets and wanting to ensure that they have the longevity to last the next couple decade with low cost inventory. And so that's been really the focus. And I think ultimately what that means is, over the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of operators are in okay position to drill relatively low cost inventory. But as you move beyond that, you're going to end up having the haves and have-nots. And kind of what I mean by that is you're going to have those operators with 10, 15, 20 years of inventory that are sub, say, $50 WTI break even and $250 NYMEX natural gas. But then you're going to have a big chunk of operators that run out of that low cost inventory, and the incremental wells that they're drilling are going to slowly move up the cost curve, right? So, and if you do believe that the US is going to be the marginal barrel that gets added, what that's going to ultimately do is drive higher oil prices in the future. Now, I wouldn't be concerned about inventory running out, whether you think about infills, refracs, additional zone, step outs into more marginal acreage that we know exists. There's a lot of inventory left. The question is, at what cost is it going to be to deliver it, right? And so
sounds bullish. All right. Before we move on from hydrocarbons, any quick thoughts on the gas market?
Gas is a little bit of a different, I think, dynamic. Really, there's no, I don't want to say no shortage, but there's a lot more available inventory just given the deliverability, right? I mean, again, the expectation is, globally, if you think about it, the demand for natural gas is going to increase quite dramatically between now and, again, the end of the decade. You can say probably an incremental 40 BCF a day of incremental gas demand. So that's, what is that, 3 times what the Haynesville produces today. So there's no shortage of demand, but there is a lot of supply coming on. And, there is concerns around LNG filling up even after the infrastructure is built out. So a bit of a different dynamic, but plenty of resource.
For sure.
And I don't know if you agree with that. What do you think?
No,
Andrew, you're the...
well, yeah, I think there's a lot of resource too. No, I think you're right. I think there's lots of resource, but the demand profile is changing pretty dramatically here in North America and abroad as different countries try and solve their power demand growth in different ways. Gas is absolutely going to play a big part. I agree with you, in the probably decades to come. And, and we'll see how that sort of evolves country by country for sure. But the U.S. is definitely going to play a big role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point there is think about power demands in the U.S., and I'm sure we're going to chat about that in a minute, but gas will play a part in that, right, for the base load. So
yeah, absolutely. And so you said my transition topic, right? Moving on to the power side for sure. Look, we've gone from 2 decades of no growth of power demand, the retirement of really good baseload assets. And here we are today. We're facing 3.6% demand growth this year alone, and more well into the future. I think the team put out, 42% load growth by 2050, something crazy like that. And so, how do you see that this change impacting the investment landscape here?
Well, I mean, it's definitely bullish for the investment landscape. You go from a decade of no power demand growth, say in the US, to your point, by 2050, 42% demand growth from, whether it's data center demand, EVs, whether it's manufacturing, you name it. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's an opportunity, but it's also going to be a challenge. We've got a aging grid, regulatory policies, intermittency of renewables, even with things like batteries. It's a pretty complex problem to solve, and depending on which regions you are across the U.S., the dynamics are going to be a little bit different, right? So it's an opportunity for sure, but it also creates a lot of challenges.
Yeah, as you were talking, I thought of one of the other demand centers for power that I think is real but not discussed is carbon capture. We talk a lot about decarbonization, and that's come up in a couple of our reports recently, which, look, carbon capture demand is certainly not the headline, and it's not even crypto anymore, and it's not EVs. It's data centers, and you mentioned it, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But just all of them together have created such a new profile that it's making it tricky for us to address. But I mean, I can't believe it took us this long to say everybody's favorite buzzword, data center. So as you think about demand that data centers alone are driving, right? How do you think this plays out? Who are the winners? Is it a sector? Is it multiple sectors? Is it a certain kind of investor? How do you see people taking advantage of what you think is to come?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Andrew. I think our expectations are between now and 2050, there's going to be over 150 gig of data center demand in that entire expectation and stack that we're expecting from all of the large load drivers. What's interesting about data centers is and just AI in general, right, is it impacts and affects and involves every industry and every market, right? every technology company, every energy company, every consumer, every business, right? It's an opportunity and a challenge that touches everything. So, and when you have markets where you expect that level of growth, it's going to result in a lot of winners. But also, what we learn is certain areas we tend, depending on the barriers to entry, we tend to overcapitalize. So there'll also be a lot of losers in the whole game, right? And returns will and can drive down if again the shale boom is any indication. If we want to think of it as, we've seen a version of this movie before, you'll have a lot of winners, but you'll also have a lot of losers. And the people that win at the end of the day are probably capital markets, the bankers and the lawyers. But no, but in all seriousness, so I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity to take advantage of what we expected the future to hold, and it's going to be there for quite some time.
Yeah, it seems like a decade's worth of investment opportunity, kind of like I guess you said, like we saw in shale, right? And I think we see the investment community, those that experienced shale, maybe sitting back a little bit and be like, I'm going to wait a little bit. Let's see how some of these things play out, and others jumping in feet first because they don't want to miss that first mover advantage. But you're right, cross sector opportunity, power, real estate, construction, tech, all of it driving massive capital
everywhere.
investment.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and so why are we building all these data centers, Manuj? What do we need them for?
Obviously, I mean, I think AI, it's a buzzword.
There it is. Tell us about AI. Is it real? Is it a flash in the pan? I mean, I think we could have talked about it 2 years ago, and people still would have been like, AI, is that rise of the machines? Is what's going on here? But now I think, I don't know, you tell me, does it seem like a more accepted technology, or still a long way to go?
Yeah, I think both, depending on your use cases and what you're trying to do. Like, you got to think, like, it's only really taken off over the last couple of years, and look at how far we've already come. I mean, even some of the capabilities that we're building and releasing at Enverus, it blows my mind what you can do with it if applied in the right way. And I think, given the focus and given every industry and every individual is engaging in some form or fashion, and all the brightest minds in the world are focused on it, the rate at which it's going to evolve and improve is going to happen at a pace that I don't think we've ever seen before. And it will change the way we all operate and that the world works, right? It just will.
So like we're like the toys.com stage of AI. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's still early. I think it's still early, and I think every quarter your mind is going to be blown by the new, innovative, and creative things that come out.
Well, I was listening to someone speak at our conference about Gen AI and the future. He assured me, it's like he was looking at me when he said this in front of 700 people, that it would not take writers' jobs. So I feel good about that. However, the stuff that we've done with Gen AI has been pretty spectacular. Like, what's next? What do we see on the horizon for the energy sector?
Yeah, I think, we obviously work with 98% of the market, right? And we're fortunate enough, based on the position that we sit in, to have lots of conversations with, whether it's operators, developers, utilities, hedge funds, private equity, all of them have some aspect of integrating AI into their workflows. I think what's interesting from an Enverus perspective is we do a lot of things and we engage and analyze and research petabytes of data, billions and
I don't even know what
billions
that is.
of rows of
Petabytes.
information.
I think you made that up.
and I think the power of AI is, we always like to say the things that we bring to our customers, right? Bring visibility to things that can typically be blurry or drive efficiencies in workflows, right? We take months and we turn them into hours. What would typically take months, turn them into hours. I honestly think with AI, we're going to turn things into minutes or seconds. And so not only that, I also think the way that the world is going to interact with software is just going to be different. It's not going to be, you have to be an expert in a platform and you need a black belt and multi-years of training to know how to use it. I think the entire population is just going to be able to ask what they want. And everything else will just happen behind the scenes and come back to you. And we've got some great examples of that with some of the things that we've built out in our Prism application and with Instant Analyst. And so that'll be coming to market soon.
Well, I'm glad I gave you the opportunity to plug Enverus here at the end of the show. So thank you very much. And we're here at time, and so I want to thank you for coming on. It's been fun to chat with you. A little reminiscing, but also it's always great to hear your views and perspectives on the energy world for sure. So thanks a lot for joining us. And
you got it, Andrew. I appreciate it, man.
And then to everyone else tuning in here, don't miss September's edition of Morning Energy Live, where my guest will be the Green Chicken from Doomberg. Pretty excited to have him on, or her, whoever they may be. And that'll be September 12th. Looking forward to seeing everyone. Thanks.